Many of our viewers knew about the consultation, contributed to the consultation a couple of years ago, and then were highly disappointed when the promised carers strategy never appeared. So tell us a bit about the Carers Action Plan and what it's intended to do.
Yes, you're absolutely right. During the spring and summer of 2016, we did do a very wide-ranging call for evidence to hear from carers, but also the people who have someone to care for them, from employers, from social workers, from NHS staff, and we had amazing, overwhelming support, over 6,500 responses, and then of course, it's been a very busy time in Parliament with general elections and all manner of other things. So I came into this job in January, and I decided that actually, rather than the long-awaited strategy, I actually wanted an action plan, because I actually wanted to have proper actions and timescales by which we could achieve things, because this is such an important portfolio for me, and it's such an important part of my portfolio.
So how are you going to make sure that this plan makes a real, actual positive difference to the daily life of carers?
So the most important thing about this plan, because, often we've had action plans in the past which have been very single government departmental focused, and I was very keen that this wasn't going to be just about the Department of Health and the social care, because when we sat down and looked at it, I said, well, what are we doing for young carers? And they said, well, that very much falls under the Department of Education. And I said, we need to get them involved. And then I said, what are we doing about, supporting carers in employment to make sure that those who want to stay and work can do, and that those who want to return to work feel supported to do that. And they said, well, that's very much the remit of the Department for Business. So I said, we need to get them involved. So basically, it's been a big work in progress, making sure this is truly cross-departmental. We've got everybody from the MOD to Culture, Media and Sport, the Minister for Loneliness. They've all had a hand in preparing this document so that it's truly embraced across government. And that means that every government department has committed to take forward certain actions. And I'm going to be holding my own biannual meetings to keep up the momentum on this, to shine a spotlight on the success and to explore areas where we need to do more. And I think that will really help when we work with stakeholders and we get feedback on how the implementation of the plan is going so far, so that it's really having its intended impact.
There's no money going with this. There's no ring-fenced funding. So in these days of tough financial pressures, how are you actually going to make any progress at all, no matter how positive and determined you feel about it personally?
Well, this bit was never about the sort of long-term funding. That's what we're doing in the Green Paper. The Green Paper is coming out later on in the summer, and that was always going to be about the long-term sustainability, the big questions around funding. This was all about starting the conversation and beginning the changes that we want to see, where carers have told us actually we can make small changes to really support them in the way that not just the government works, but the way that local authorities work, in the way that the communities pull together, and in the way that businesses and employers support carers. So that's why it does things like, which aren't massive big ticket money items, but are actually fundamentally vital for carers, such as the project to help identify young carers, because often the young people who are fulfilling really quite important caring responsibilities often don't see themselves as carers. They don't self-identify, especially if they come from some of the more harder to reach communities. So it's really important through the Department of Education that we make sure people are equipped to identify where those carers are, so that we can put in place the package of support they need, because actually we know that those young people, if they're not supported at the right time, they may never go on to achieve their own aspirations and ambitions in life, because they'll be held back by the incredible caring support that they showed others. And it's things like that which are just small changes that every government department can do that make a world of difference.
It sounds a little like marginal gains in sport.
Well, it's about a package, isn't it? And it's also about changing a culture. It's about changing a culture where everybody identifies the incredible commitment that carers make across the country, how much money they save the government, the huge contribution they make to our country, and how we must all do our bit to support them. So that's everybody from employers right the way to community groups and charities, but of course the government's got a really important role in this. And I think, by collectively working across government, it was a really good way of identifying all the pulling all the threads together and making a really good start. And I don't presume for one moment that this is the answer to everybody's questions. It certainly isn't that. It's the start of the conversation. And it's the start of a conversation which we're going to pick up on, and we've committed to pick up on once every 6 months to check how it's going and check what more needs to be done. And I think that's a much more healthy way of approaching it. It's a much more action plan than a strategy, because every step of the way we'll be sitting down and looking at how far we've come, how far we still need to go, and what we need to be able to do to achieve that.
You can be sure that our viewers will be checking on your progress probably more frequently than once every 6 months or so, as no doubt they'll be telling us in due course. Just finally, one of the criticisms that was made of the consultation, you probably won't be aware of it, not having been the minister at the time, but there were lots of comments about it was too unwieldy. It was a 54-page online document. Indeed, young carers told us they'd rather have a pen and a piece of paper to write it down than fill in an online form. Some statistical experts said, well, it's not really statistically significant, the amount you've responses you've got, concerns about that. How do you address all that and turn it all round into something positive to move forward with?
Well, of course, we did have thousands of responses to the call for evidence, but that was just part of the engagement that we've done with all manner of our incredible stakeholders and others. So I like to think that we've picked up on some of the really key points that they've all been making to us over the recent years. And we're never going to get it right first time. We're never going to 100% nail it. But I think that I was aiming to make a really good first attempt at really beginning to make a difference and putting some really strong foundations in place for a piece of work that's going to continue on into the future. I've got a real vested interest in this. My mum was a carer for my grandmother when she had dementia, and I saw the impact that it had on her life and on all our family lives, and the toll that it can take on somebody. She was incredible, and I have always had very much personal investment in making sure that we do put in place some changes that really can make a difference to people's lives.